Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have so much to get to. We have Gavin Newsom, who's apparently not only not at all interested in his day job, Jim, that he's so focused on Trump that he's basically spending his whole time pretending to be Trump on social media and beyond. But now it's starting to backfire, some of his tactics, including on his own side of the aisle, which is always very entertaining. We also have President Trump grabbing a 10% stake in Intel for the United States government. That is sending chills down a lot of people's spines, especially if you like free markets and unfettered business. And then we've also got some interesting discussion at the end about the Michigan Mamdani. Yep. There's another guy pretty much cut from the same cloth running for U.S. Senate in my home state. And I don't know if he's going to be the nominee, but he is certainly making waves in all the wrong ways in the Great Lakes state. All right, Jim, let's dive right into the Gavin Newsom stuff because this guy loves attention more than anything else. And we're probably helping him out a little bit here, even though we're going to be criticizing him all the way through. He's got this Twitter account, Governor Newsom Press Office, that has been basically trying to mimic Trump tweets, ranting about various things. Every word is in all caps and going on and on and on. But he's also trying to use it now to claim that he's got a better record, especially on crime, compared to red states. But the blowback on this is so entertaining, not only from our side, but also the fact that he's, in most cases here, really attacking Democrats. So he's had this whole series of tweets. One will say, Tampa's murder rate is 20% higher than Los Angeles. And then Stephen Miller, the online guy, not the guy at the White House, says Tampa has elected a Democrat mayor every term since 1995. And then when it comes to Memphis, Newsom says Memphis has a 243% more violent crime than Los Angeles per capita. Another guy says Memphis has had a Democrat mayor since before Gavin Newsom was born. St. Louis murder rate, Gavin Newsom says, is a staggering 190% higher than Oakland's. Do you think Fox will cover that? Stephen Miller, the last time St. Louis elected a Republican mayor was 1943. Houston has 322 murders last year, only 35 for San Francisco. And Stephen Miller says every mayor of Houston has been a Democrat since 1982. That's 43 years. So, might be a wake-up call for Republican governors in red states to send some National Guard troops into these cities because obviously the Democratic mayors aren't getting it done. But what do you make of Gavin Newsom essentially throwing some Democratic mayors under the bus to try and make his record look better?
Greg, there is a theme, a common thread running between our first and third martinis today. So I keep hearing from people that Gavin Newsom has adopted this alternate persona, this Trumpification of his own social media presence. And I keep hearing from some folks in the mainstream media and Democratic political consultants, and yes, I could hear everyone saying, Jim, you're repeating yourself, both arguing that this has been very successful. And so my successful how? What is the measuring stick for this being? It's getting him some attention. We're talking about it. There's that. I think the argument is it makes Democrats feel good about themselves. That basically they see it as, aha, see, Republicans, doesn't that sound stupid? Well, that's what your guy sounds like. Now our guy sounds stupid too. So take that. And the other thing, if you think Trump's persona, his method of communication, his method of making arguments, if you feel like it's been this really toxic and destructive impact on American political culture since he descended from the escalator about a decade ago, why are you giving people more of it? Why are you like if you really think that Trump has been this, then why are you adopting this? I know they say imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery. But the idea is, do you think this is making people more likely to elect Gavin Newsom to be president of the United States, which we all know is kind of his ultimate goal here? I'm very skeptical of this. I'm open to the argument, but I have yet to see any of this. I think what this does is it makes Democrats feel good. Maybe that'll help them in the Democratic primary. I'm not convinced of that. In terms of the general argument of, well, look at these blue cities and red states and look at how bad their crime rates are. If Greg Abbott could control the crime policies of the Houston Police Department, would they be the way they are right now? Probably not. If Ron DeSantis could control the policies, actions, and deployments of the Tampa Police Department, would they be the way they are now? Probably not. Let's also point out that not just having Democratic mayors, certain cities have different structures and mayor has more control over some parts than others. But generally, they all have overwhelmingly Democratic city councils as well. Republicans in big city politics are pretty, few and far between. So the idea of, the crime rate in, Tampa is a reflection of Republican policies statewide. The crime rate in Houston is a reflection. No. Do governors have influence over city crime rates? They can allocate state police. They have a small amount of influence. But I think we'd all agree much, much less influence than the policy set by the mayor and by the city government, and who's the police chief and what's the culture of the police organization and all of these other factors. So it's kind of an inane argument, but I don't think people are going to be all that persuaded, other than people who want to be persuaded or who want to believe that everything is terrible in red states and nobody would ever want to live there. Never mind that there's this giant influx of people moving to red states like Florida and Texas. Just also one last point. I checked in because it's now been almost 2 weeks since the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. was put under control of the Trump administration. CNN checked at the crime statistics, and this is as of 2 days ago, right? It said that, lo and behold, property crimes have dropped 19% compared to the week before. Violent crime dipped by about 17%. We've discussed this before on the podcast. As a short-term move, fine, this is going to help. Ultimately, Washington, D.C. needs better policing. It needs more police on the streets. It needs better prosecution. So this is not really a long-term solution here. CNN reports that, there was a 6% increase in burglary cases and a 14% increase in cases of assault with a dangerous weapon. So you could almost see every progressive going, aha, ready, look at this, look at these increases. Well, thankfully, CNN did put the raw numbers there. So that 14% increase in cases of assault with a dangerous weapon, 1 week it was 14 cases. The next week it was 16 cases. So there were 2 more than the previous week. Not a particularly big jump. And then in burglaries, previous week there were 16 reported. Following week there were 17 reported. Now, obviously you want all those numbers to go down. You don't want to see any increase. But I don't think that's the sort of change that local residents are going to feel or notice when it goes up by 1 or 2 reported per week.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And we saw the initial numbers of carjackings way down. That's been a huge problem in D.C. In terms of these cities, I think your point is spot on. You think Ron DeSantis would want the cities to be sanctuary cities if he could control that? Do you think he would want prosecutors basically letting people walk free with no cash bail or a slap on the wrist compared to what they actually did? It's the left that's the reason these cities are floundering. If there's one pocket where things are horrible compared to where things are pretty good over the rest of the state, it's not that hard to figure out why that would be the case. But Gavin Newsom, I don't think Americans going to want it in 2028, especially if this continues all the way till then. It's already annoying and stupid, but you don't know when to stop usually. So, all right. Well, if you're tired of watching crime rise in American cities or ridiculous politicians shirk their duties and focus on getting more attention, I can imagine you'd get a few lines in the face, and that's where Caldera Lab is here to help. Their high-performance skincare is designed specifically for men. It's simple, effective, and backed by science.
The eye serum helps reduce the appearance of tired eyes, dark circles, and puffiness with a breakthrough peptide complex and adaptogens that will support your skin's resilience. Basically, it helps you look well-rested. And the base layer is a nutrient-rich moisturizer infused with plant stem cells and snow mushroom extract, which are known for their deep hydration and skin-rejuvenating properties. It absorbs fast, leaving a non-greasy matte finish.
And in a consumer study, 100% of men said their skin looked smoother and healthier. 97% noticed improved hydration and texture. 94% reported a more youthful appearance. And it's not just talk. Caldera Lab spends years developing and testing each formula. So upgrade your skincare with Caldera Lab. Easy, effective, and made for men. Skip the drugstore and try it for yourself. Visit calderalab.com/3ml and use the code 3ml for 20% off your first order. Again, that's calderalab.com/3ml with code 3ml for 20% off. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And this one happened late last week. We kind of knew it was coming, and apparently we haven't seen the end of it. President Trump on Friday announcing, quote, "It is my great honor to report that the United States of America now fully owns and controls 10% of Intel, a great American company that has an even more incredible future." He says the United States paid nothing for these shares, and the shares are now valued at approximately $11 billion. This is a great deal for America, and also a great deal for Intel. Building leading-edge semiconductors and chips, which is what Intel does, is fundamental to the future of our nation. Now, he's not done yet, because today he put out on Truth Social, I paid $0 for Intel. It's worth approximately $11 billion. All goes to the USA. Why are stupid people unhappy with that? I will make deals like that for our country all day long. I will also help those companies that make such lucrative deals with the United States. I love seeing their stock price go up, making the USA richer and richer. More jobs for America. Who would not want to make deals like that? Well, people who don't want the government getting involved like that with private industry. That's who. And so over on, this was Fox Business, Larry Kudlow has a show over there. Steve Moore, who's been well known in conservative economic circles for a long time, talking about a lot of different things. And towards the end of their conversation, it was clear that Kudlow and Moore did not like this at all.
How about the U.S. government owning 10% of Intel?
I hate corporate welfare. That's privatization in reverse. We want the government to divest of assets, not buy assets. So terrible. One of the bad ideas that's come out of this White House.
I am very, very uncomfortable with that idea. I'm very uncomfortable with that one.
Well, Jim, like every other day, the left is accusing Donald Trump of being a fascist over this or whatever issue he's talking about that day. He is not a fascist, but he needs to be very, very careful here, because when it comes to focusing directly on the economic aspects of fascism, directly telling private industry what to do, or sometimes having actual government stake in private industry, is something that the far left and repressive regimes tend to do. You don't want to establish this precedent. You don't want to let people think this is okay. And one of the big problems we see all the time in this town is that the party in power never thinks they're going to be out of power anytime ever. And so if the other party starts to realize, oh, well, Trump did it, I guess we can do it, it's going to get very, very ugly. And the fact that Trump doesn't see a problem with it at all, he's excited to do more of it, not good.
It is fascinating when you run into a left of center person who tries to make the argument that Nazi Germany was some sort of free market Adam Smith ideal. No, it was not. Yes, there were private companies in Nazi Germany, but in the end, their purpose was to serve the state. Whatever the state needed, that was prioritized over everything else there. Look, this comes after the Trump administration negotiated self-status as a golden shareholder in U.S. Steel in exchange for approving the deal with Nippon Steel over in Japan. Gave it an enormous amount. It basically gives the U.S. a veto over all kinds of decisions involving relocation, employees' salaries, transferring production or jobs outside the United States, closing or idling plants before certain timeframes, the whole 9 yards. You could argue the $400 million in taxpayer money that the Pentagon has used to purchase a 15% stake in the rare earth mineral mining company MP Materials, making it, by the way, the largest shareholder in the company. You could argue that's for national security purposes, and I suppose that's probably the most defensible of these moves. But I just want to point out that, once you've said that if the national security interest is high enough, that the U.S. government should take a share in it. The U.S. government is the biggest customer of a whole bunch of companies. Northrop Grumman and all kinds, is it the idea of if they're really important, the U.S. government should have an ownership share in it? I'm not sure I like that idea. Then the Trump administration decided that NVIDIA and AMD should be allowed to sell advanced chips to Chinese companies. This was barred under the Biden administration, as long as 15% of the money from those sales goes to the federal government. So remember, before it was a national security threat, but if 15% is going to the big guy, 15% is going to the Trump administration, well, then it's fine. Then the national security threat disappears there. So now you've got all this kind of stuff going on. And now on top of this, a 10% share in Intel. Greg, I had said, whenever, I run into somebody who's with the administration, could we just get more Intel? Could we just get more intelligence? 10% better. That was not what I meant. I did not mean the company Intel. I meant intelligence. So this is just a continuing pattern. And so kudos to Larry Kudlow and Steve Moore. And let's point out, these are guys who are on board with 90% of the Trump agenda or a compare. These are not guys who are, about as far from knee-jerk critics of President Trump as you can get. And I would point out, Greg, that I'm glad we played this audio. They didn't exactly dwell on that. They had to come to a cut to commercial real fast after this. But, kudos to Kudlow for bringing it up. Kudos to Moore for answering it. He almost had this, throwing back his head in madness of this, being driven crazy by a Republican president who keeps trying to enact government ownership over these private companies. It's a terrible trend, and I've seen it denounced. I don't see it having any real consequence. I don't see, Trump, as you said, jumped on Truth Social and said, I'm going to keep doing this. I just wish we had Republicans in the Senate, Greg. I just wish they existed. I just wish, ever since they were abducted by aliens, it's just been very hard to get anybody to stand up for free market economics. Again, not a good idea. Clearly, Trump just thinks this is a swell thing. And also, remember, Republicans, we got to stop that economy, Mamdani. Honest to goodness, what is a bigger threat to the free market? The New York City government trying to set up some grocery stores, which, by the way, probably would go out of business within a couple of years. It would be a terrible idea. Or the federal government owning shares of large chip makers. I think you can make an argument that they're either equally bad or maybe even the second one is even worse. It'd be nice to see if somebody stood up for the free market, but I'm sure the Democrats will get right on that, Greg.
There are ways to encourage chip makers. There are ways to attract chip makers. Have a business environment that encourages and extols and promotes the free market. People will want to be here. It'll make it more lucrative for them to do the work here. It'll be more profitable for them. Set the right conditions. That's what a good conservative government can do, not taking ownership stakes, because we do need to create semiconductors here. We don't know how long Taiwan's going to be in a position to do that. Hopefully it's a very long time, but we just don't know. And so we need to be ready in case it's no longer in that position. But there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And this is definitely the wrong way to do it. Bowl and branch sheets. Jim and I have both received our bowl and branch sheets. Mine are mineral colored. I didn't know that was a color. I believe there's about 10 colors and everything else is just a ish or light or dark after that. But I know a lot of people differ. But these sheets are fantastic. The first thing I noticed, Jim, because this doesn't happen a lot with other sheets, is they actually fit over the mattress. I got the brand new mattress a couple of weeks ago, but some of the other sheets had a tough time getting tucked over the corners. This one was fantastic. Nice big pillowcases. So if you have a longer pillow, fits easily into there. Also, the sheets are cooling. Mrs. Columbus hates to sleep hot, so the fact that we have the cooling sheets is fantastic as well. They feel fantastic, and somehow, Jim, they get softer over time. I can't wait to figure out how that works.
Oh, Greg, in the Garrity household, we went with Bluestone.
Okay.
Also known as Bluish. Bowl and Branch's sheets are made with the finest 100% organic cotton in a soft, breathable, durable weave. Their products have a quality you can feel immediately and become even softer with every wash. And remember, this comes with a 30-night worry-free guarantee. My guess is after 29 nights, you know pretty darn well that you'll like these sheets.
Exactly. So feel the difference an extraordinary night's sleep can make with Bowl and Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bowlandbranch.com/3martini. Spell that out, 3martini. That's Bowl and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/3martini, all spelled out, to save 15% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions do apply. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And you mentioned Zohran Mamdani, and that, of course, is a big race that's going to be happening later this year on Election Day, New York City. Mamdani clearly the front runner at the moment. There's basically a clone of Zohran Mamdani running for the U.S. Senate in Michigan, where Gary Peters is retiring. There are three major Democratic candidates in this race. One is a state lawmaker named Mallory McMorrow, who had a rant about DEI and LGBTQ stuff on the floor, so she became a viral sensation on the left. Then there's also Haley Stevens, who is a congresswoman from the Metro Detroit area, and she's believed to be the favorite in this race. But there's also a doctor named Abdul El-Sayed. He ran for governor in 2018, and he's so far left, people on the right were actually relieved that Gretchen Whitmer won the primary over him. That is how far left this guy is. He is beloved by Bernie Sanders. Bernie has been with him many times. He wants Medicare for all. He obviously hates Israel, to no one's surprise. But yesterday at an event, he decided he was not in favor of Michelle Obama's strategy of when they go low, we go high, even though Michelle Obama didn't do that either. But Abdul El-Sayed says, no, it's going to get ugly.
We need Democrats who have the courage to stand up to the power brokers in our own party, let alone Trump and his goons. We don't back down. We don't back down. We don't back down. With all due respect, if they go low, we don't go high. We take them to the mud and choke them out.
Take him to the mud and choke him out. Jim, I'm sure he's going to say that was just a figure of speech, and it just means you have to be tough to win, so you're in a position to help people and all that stuff. Of course, if a Republican had said it, would be headlines for days about the evil, aggressive nature of the party. But what do you make of what you heard and what you're seeing from this guy?
Greg, is take him to the mud and choke him out, is that a figure of speech?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying that's their spin.
Okay. And I just, because like I'd love to say, do you mean metaphorically or literally? Because I think that's an important distinction. And secondly, this guy has a medical degree. Now, I seem to remember it was a Hippocratic oath, not the hypocritic oath. And the whole point was first do no harm. I have a feeling taking them into the mud and choking them out, that seems like doing harm. That's at minimum, your risk of infection from rolling around in the mud seems pretty bad, to say nothing of breaking off the airwaves, the airway to the lungs and not allowing someone to breathe. So, Greg, you and I have been doing this podcast for a long time. Remember after Gabby Giffords, there was this idea of a new tone.
Oh, yeah.
That everyone had to watch what they say, and it had been all this incendiary. Now, here's the thing. In the end, the guy who shot Gabby Giffords was a paranoid schizophrenic who believed that punctuation was part of how the government controlled people and things like that. So he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But there was this whole idea of like, oh, what if... by really denouncing the opposite side in the most angriest way possible, venting your spleen and raging, what if that was actually creating an environment in which somebody who's looking for an excuse to do violence would say, this is a socially justifiable form of violence. Now, if you disagreed with that, Keith Olbermann would say, you're the worst person in the world. That was, there was actually very mitigated signs of a new tone. As you said, I think the idea, like Michelle Obama's idea, when they go low, we go high, debatable at best. And I think it is we could find a lot of examples of other Democrats not living up to that. I suspect that what this candidate is doing here is basically, this is what every party always wants to believe after a defeat. They want to believe we lose because we're too nice, because we're too high-minded. Sometimes a variation of this is, we lost that last election because we're too focused on policies. We're not interested in this culture war, riffraff, sideshow Barker carnival tone. No. We're too sophisticated. The problem is we're too smart, and we're trying to, and this goes all the way back to, wasn't Adlai Stevenson was told, every thinking man in America is voting for you. And he said, yes, but I need a majority. There's always been this self-flattering. We lose because we're such good people. It almost seems like a variation of the job interview question. What do you think your biggest weakness is? And, people have now been trained to say, I think my weakness is that I care too much, or I work too hard. This is all utter nonsense. No, you lost because your policies were unpopular. And you ran Mr. Magoo, and then you ran a vice president who everybody expected was going to grow into the job, but who clearly couldn't. And she picked a guy who was, upper Midwestern red-green goofball to be the running mate. That's why you lost. You picked bad candidates. And this is the last thing. Just he's earned the nickname the Michigan Mamdani, a bizarre form of credit to Zoran Mamdani, in that just a matter of months he has become a brand within the Democratic Party. Not necessarily a positive. Like if you hear, this is the Minnesota Mamdani, this is the Michigan Mamdani. If you hear that and you're conservative, you're like, this is the guy we got to keep out of office at all costs. This is why you can find some conservatives saying, is Andrew Cuomo, can't we forgive killing a whole bunch of old people? Or isn't it just a normal habit to try to grope state troopers? We can find ways to come to terms with Andrew Cuomo. I don't think you really should. I think Slee was the best option you're going to find out there, even if he's a bit of a long shot. There is this interesting thing in which the Mamdani, he's likely to win the mayoral race. We'll see how this goes in these Democratic primaries. That it's possible the Democratic Party has decided the way to beat Trump in 2024 is to become much more openly socialist/communist, which I'd say is really terrible, except we've got a Republican president who keeps trying to nationalize companies.
If Mamdani wins, he will be the darling of the media. The Democrats are already rallying around him. They're not ostracizing him at all anymore. He's the future. Ben Rhodes was saying he's the future of the party.
Isn't it great that he couldn't bench press a single one, 135? I'm not saying I'm the best, but I could have done. I can tell you, I can do well more than 135 on the bench press.
Well, maybe you can run for mayor of New York City at some point. But if Mamdani wins, he'll be the darling of the left. He'll be the darling of the media. And by August, which I believe is when the primary is for Michigan Senate race, he'll be the darling. And most likely, you won't see all the deleterious effect of his policies kicking in yet. It won't be blatantly obvious. And if he is the darling of the party, people like him are going to become very popular in the party. So I fear that this guy could end up as the nominee. Right now, it's Haley Stevens, I think, is the front runner. But if Mamdani is just the darling of the left, I think people like El-Sayed could end up benefiting from that. And if they're not stopped in the general election, look out.
There will be a lot of Democrats who want to believe going further left is the way that they win more. And the idea that the state of Michigan isn't really like New York City, that's just going to be a small detail they're going to overlook.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So we will watch. Long way to go there, of course, almost a year before the primary, but nonetheless, not someone you want anywhere close to the United States Senate. Jim, on that note, I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Monday. Join us again Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.